morning. Welcome to Planet in the Word, week 30. And this week we're going to start talking about Isaiah. I'm going to divide it into two parts because you're going to be in Isaiah for a little while. This week we're going to do chapters 1 through 39 in our video. And then next week I will go on to talk about why we stopped at 39. So first of all, let's take a step back and examine Isaiah. Isaiah is phenomenally archaeologically backed up. So Isaiah's scroll was the largest, most well-preserved first scroll found in Cave 1 in Qumran, discovered by the Bedouin boys in 46 and sort of discovered by the known world in 47. Isaiah is just phenomenally complete, well-preserved, and gives us a lot of archaeological evidence and backup to our Hebrew biblical scriptures. So that is sort of a really fun thing to know, is that we can actually see it today. And in fact, a picture of it will be on your screen because it's really the PR picture that is taken and given for the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is usually the visual that they give when ever talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. But we want to talk about Isaiah. So Isaiah was a southern prophet who prophesied both about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. He prophesied both about the Assyrian invasion and the Babylonian invasion. And that's because he most likely lived and wrote between about 740, 739 BC, all the way up to about 681 BC. And what that tells us is in that time period, the Assyrian army invaded and took away northern Israel. He was alive and writing and prophesying and being a representative for Yahweh at that time. He really lived probably during 4 kings of the Judean southern kingdom. He lived during Uzziah, he lived during Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the very end of the section we're going to talk about today, and that is where it has to do with Hezekiah. Now, you also read about Hezekiah in the Kings and the Chronicles that add to the story. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But the part I really want to spend some time on today that you're going to be reading is one of my favorite stories. And I really don't know why I'm so passionate about this story, other than it's such a sweet example about what the Lord really wants from us. And basically what's happening is Assyrian army is invading, and they have come to basically the doorway of Jerusalem, and they are knocking on the door, and they are sending messengers threatening Israel, the southern kingdom, Judah, Jerusalem. They're sending emissaries, they're sending letters, and Hezekiah is becoming very afraid. So he sends to Isaiah the prophet, who was already well known, and he's basically panicking, and Isaiah sends back, listen, you're not really going to have to worry about this. And the Assyrian army threatens and basically says, look, don't think that Yahweh's coming in to save you, because it's Yahweh, your God, that has allowed our army this far into your territory. So just know you're going to die, and Yahweh is not going to be stepping in. They send this in the form of a letter. And Hezekiah does the most beautiful thing with this letter. He takes this threatening document and he walks into the house of Yahweh, and he gets down on his knees and he spreads it out in front of the Lord, and then he prays the most beautiful prayer, basically saying, Lord, you see everything. You know everything. I am begging you to intercede. And it's one of my favorite, sweetest, most tender moments. Judah's history was immediately stopping and collecting all the money that they could and seeking foreign armies to come and save them. And very rarely did the kings have such a heart after Yahweh that they immediately, their gut knee-jerk response was to go in and lay it before the Lord. And Isaiah actually responds to this. And he says to Hezekiah, listen, don't be afraid. Yahweh's going to save you. This man is going to hear a rumor about his country being attacked. He's going to leave, and then he's going to be killed, which is exactly what ends up happening. So it's just this sweet story. But let's spend a few minutes archaeologically and talk about Hezekiah also, because he did a couple of neat things. Hezekiah, knowing the Assyrian army was coming in, was the king who diverted the water supply from outside the city of Jerusalem to inside the city of Jerusalem, because it made them vulnerable. If the foreign armies came in and blocked off their water supply, Israel's really ability to stand was very limited. So he was the one that sort of sent it underground into the city of Jerusalem, which you can still walk along today if you get to visit. You can walk in Hezekiah's tunnels, which is amazing. The second thing to note is, with some back and forth, they think that it is Hezekiah who was probably the king responsible for hiding the Ark of the Covenant. It is, at this time, they think that he hid it in fear of the Assyrian army getting hold of it. And after this time period, we really don't see the Ark of the Covenant appearing within our biblical record. So it's hypothesized that Hezekiah is responsible for the hiding of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, one other thing I'd like to note. Archaeologically speaking, outside of our Bible, there's very little evidence through history that archaeologists can point to and say, this means this man lived. What I mean by that is, we read through our Bible, and to us, we see the genealogies and the evidence of people living, but academics have argued even that there was no evidence for David actually having been king of Israel until one year there is. Hezekiah is one of these people that actually in 2015, Eliat Mazar, who is a famous Israeli archaeologist, working on a dump site outside of Jerusalem, which is a little controversial because it butts right up to some Arab cities. It was the garbage heap. He was doing some sifting through these dump sites. And one of the things that he came across was a bullet, which is going to appear on your screen. And that is essentially a seal that was put on probably documentation, a scroll sealed up, or sometimes they would do it on the taxation pottery, like you would find the king's seal on the oil that was donated or the wine that was brought in. This seal works somewhat like our wax seals today. Essentially, it's the same idea, but this seal probably was on a parchment or document, and it's was pressed probably with the actual ring of Hezekiah, because this bullet states, belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. It was an archaeological find that rocked the biblical world because it established the actual mythology of Hezekiah was actually a human, a man, a son of exactly who the Bible says he was, and a king of Judah, separate from Israel. So it backed up, it gave evidence for multiple hypotheses academically that had been made, but had never been able to be proved. So I hope you find that interesting. This has been fun. Next week, we'll talk about why do we stop at chapter 39? And we're going to go on to finish up Isaiah as you spend quite a bit of time there. Thank you for stopping by. Have a good week.